Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is a Heel Heat Top 10. Now the topic this time, returns in wrestling. Now before we go into the top 10, we want to mention that a friend of ours and a person that's liked some videos on our show and commented, Dizzle Pup is the one that recommended this. So if you've got some things you want to see us do, we're not against recommendations. If we could fit them in and we could do them and it makes sense to us, we will. And this one here, this is for our friend Dizzle Pup. Now going right into the countdown, we'll start with our number 10, fittingly with a guy that counts it down every time he comes out, Y2J Chris Jericho in his 2007 return with the Save Us promos. Now the only reason that this isn't much higher on the list is he's used his formula 2 or 3 times now. It's become passe that we see the weird promos and then Y2J return. But the first time it was really interesting. He came to save us from Randy Orton's boring title run. Kind of sounds like we need him again right now. But it was an interesting concept, interesting thing. They had the codes, everything. It led to some cool stuff, and it led to Y2J coming back, which is always cool. One of the great wrestlers of the last 20 years. Now our number 9 is not necessarily a return from being gone, but a return to an organization. The guy wrestled in the WWF at the time one night before and returned on the very first Nitro in WCW, and that's Lex Luger. Making his triumphant return to WCW, setting a spark, starting the Monday Night War, showing us that absolutely anything can happen on WCW Nitro, that this was a show to watch, that this was a show that they're going to break the rules on. And he didn't do much on the show other than add his presence and add a big name star jumping ship. Now our number 8 return is a return of a whole organization. And that is correct. ECW One Night Stand. Now I'm not going to talk about what happened with the ECW brand of WWE version. That was fucking terrible. That was an abomination. ECW One Night Stand. Probably one of the greatest WWE produced pay-per-views I've ever seen. It was an ECW show with WWE production. It's what the restart of ECW should have been. It should have carried on from this instead of watering it down and turning it into a third-rate show of a place where jobbers go to wrestle. But the resurrection and reincarnation in 2005 of ECW for that one night, and made us, all of us old ECW fans, happy and made us proud. And safe to say, it made a lot of us cry, including myself. It was a special night, a special return. Unfortunately, after that it was bastardized and turned into crap. But the ECW One Night Stand will also always hold a special place in my heart, and I believe in a lot of the fans of ECW's hearts as well. Now our number 7 is a return to American wrestling from a guy who never has been in the WWE, and that is the Sting. After the closing of WCW, he did a couple tours in Japan. I believe he did the failed Hulk Hogan experiment show, XWF. And we didn't see him in America for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And then all of a sudden, Sting showed up in the 1-year anniversary of TNA, giving TNA one of the huge names in wrestling and a huge star, and putting a spark there, much like Lex Luger with Monday Nitro. Sting was one of the first real big names to come to TNA and make a difference and make fans, wrestling fans, stand up and take notice of what was going on there. Now our number 6 return is also on a debut show. The debut of ECW on the TNN network we had Raven return in a most shocking way. The precursor was the Dudley Boys win the ECW tag team titles, are threatening to leave to go to WWE. Tommy Dreamer comes out, basically says, we're not going to let you do that, starts fighting with the Dudleys, gets outmanned until we see Raven return, and surprisingly, helping his mortal enemy, Tommy Dreamer, which starts off a great run of tag team championship between the two, Raven and Dreamer. Very interesting and compelling storylines. If you know me, the Raven Dreamer story is my absolute favorite wrestling feud story of all time, and this just added a little bit to that, made it feel really special when they did this, and it brought some of the older ECW fans, it gave us some joy to see Raven and Dreamer again. Whether it be as tag team, whether it be as enemies, which they eventually split up and became again. Raven and Dreamer in the ring together is always going to be something special. And that night on that show was something special. Now our number 5 is probably the most recent return on this list. The night after WrestleMania 28, we had the return of the next big thing, Brock Lesnar, for 2 nights in a row at WrestleMania and Monday Night Raw. Every fan in America was cheering for it. We had Lesnar's return, coming out as only Lesnar could come out, back to the badass that he was when he left, becoming a guy that's a part-time talent now, still making huge impacts every show he appears on. And this was no question. He came out and made an impact with John Cena right away. Brought us into a thing where we could see, it led us into some awesome matches with Lesnar and Cena, Lesnar and Triple H later on. Great way to come back to the company after being in UFC and trying out for NFL. Brock Lesnar brought his star power back to the WWE and brought eyes back into the show. Now our number 4 is a guy that Brock Lesnar is going to wrestle at this year's WrestleMania. And that's the dead man himself, Undertaker, returning in 2004 at WrestleMania that year to his dead man persona. Not so much a return of a guy, more or less a return to his roots. Undertaker had taken a few years where he was the American Badass Undertaker, which was more of a biker style, less of the Undertaker Demon style. When he came back as the Dead Man, he brought back the quintessential Undertaker, the one that we know and love, the gimmick we love him in, the indestructible guy that is the master of WrestleMania, that is the king of WrestleMania, that's probably the most respected wrestler in the history of wrestling. The Dead Man character is iconic. There's nothing more you could say about it. Probably one of the most iconic characters in wrestling, right up there with Steve Austin, right up there with Hulk Hogan. The Undertaker is the Dead Man, is the way it should be and should always be. Now our number 3 could have easily been our number 1 if it was booked better afterwards. However, and surprisingly, WCW dropped the ball very badly after. In 1998, we had the return of the Four Horsemen, and the 4th member, after a long hiatus, was the returning Nature Boy Ric Flair, who cuts one of the greatest in-ring promos in the history of professional wrestling. He talks about himself, he talks about Eric Bischoff, tells Bischoff to fire him, he doesn't care. Gets so crazy and so fired up that he actually starts bleeding from his mouth because he bites himself. One of the great promos from one of the truly great talkers in the history of wrestling. Was the setup and should have been the beginning of another great run with the Four Horsemen. However, this being WCW, there were too many backstage powers that stopped that from happening. They can't take away that moment, though. That moment in time when Ric Flair comes back and Ric Flair is in the WCW ring where he belongs. Ric Flair belonged in a WCW ring, belonged being the highlight of the show, belonged being the leader of the Four Horsemen, and belonged being the Nature Boy, doing what only the Nature Boy can, and that is driving the crowd into a frenzy while he drives himself into a frenzy. Amazing. I get goosebumps just thinking about how great that promo was and how great of a return that was. Now our number 2 is a return to the WWF at the time. The night after WrestleMania 14, we seen a reorder of D-Generation X. Out was Shawn Michaels, in was the New Age Outlaws, and the former 1-2-3 Kid, the former Six-Pac 6, our friend X-Pac Sean Waltman came back. Again, much like the Ric Flair return, came out, cut a promo on Eric Bischoff, cut a promo on Hulk Hogan, talked a lot of shit. Started off, I want to say, in my opinion, this was the greatest Monday Night Raw I've ever seen. Everybody knows that the night after WrestleMania, Raw resets for what's going on the next year. X-Pac and D-Generation X set the tone with what was going to be going on for the next 5 years with this one promo. And with the one regrouping, with D-Generation X being stronger than it ever was actually, you had X-Pac coming back, cutting an emotional promo, cutting a hard-hitting promo, leading us to the point now where the WrestleMania, the night after WrestleMania, has become almost bigger than WrestleMania. You've seen it this year, or last year with the hijacking of Raw. You've seen it the year before with the Lesnar return. You've seen it in years past where Lesnar debuted the night after WrestleMania. This is the night where the WWE presses reset, and this was the start of that, with X-Pac coming back to the WWE, starting what was keeping the ball rolling and what was already started with the Attitude Era and the real boom period and the real WWE coming in and taking over the ratings and winning the Monday Night War. Now, as you've seen them before in our top 10s, before we go into our number 1, we're going to do a best of the rest. These are the things that just barely miss this list, in no particular order. We just didn't have enough room to fit more than 10. The first we want to talk about is in 2010, Bret Hart returning to the WWE. After all the years, all the animosity, we get Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels in the ring together, hugging it out, fixing in their differences. Bret returns home to the organization where he made himself a star. Emotional night, emotional return. The funny thing about this was supposed to be the start of a new Monday Night War with TNA going live on Monday night that same night. However, it became the start of a TNA slaughter by WWE, where a very smartly booked return of Bret the Hitman Hart kept a high majority of the fans in America were watching the WWE show. Now, coming off of that, we have our return at the Royal Rumble 2008, our number 30 entrance, John Cena. Takes a lot of crap from the internet wrestling community. I've given him my fair share myself. I'm not a hater of the guy. I'm not a fan of the guy. I think he's a solid wrestler. I think he deserves everything he gets. He's one of the hardest workers in the history of wrestling. His return and the pop he gets from which normally is a very anti-Cena crowd, makes this a moment that's one of them Royal Rumble moments where we all stand in awe of. We always get that one moment. It seems to be every year they try to put that one moment where they surprise the fans and give us something really awesome. In 2008, that was John Cena returning and taking his spot right back at the top of the heap. And also, Again, another one of the best of the rest from 1998 Monday Night Raw, a show that was highlighted by ECW wrestlers being invited onto Monday Night Raw as they were feuding with Jerry the King Lawler's USWA at the time. The ECW wrestlers and a very pro ECW crowd, if you watch that, if you go back and watch that Monday Night Raw, and you go back and watch ECWs of the time in the New York area, you will see it's a lot of the same faces in the crowd. The crowd showed up for the ECW guys. The whole night they promoted that there was going to be a surprise return at the end of the night. That return was the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors. And in a very pro ECW crowd, the Road Warriors got a huge, intense pop. Only the Road Warriors can. Stole the show of the night, made it one of the most memorable Raws ever. Really fun show. Started another fun run with the last really great run of the Road Warriors started that night. And last but not least, on our best of the rest, we're going to talk about our good friend, the lovely Laura Lyons, from the podcast Live from the Armory. Also a good personal friend. One of her personal favorites, Magnum TA, returning from a car crash in 1987 at the Crockett Cup, Jim Crockett Sr. Memorial Cup tag team tournament, where he came out, walked to the ring with a cane, hugged his friends Nikita Koloff and Dusty Rhodes as they went on to win the tournament. Just another touching moment, moment with a guy that should have had everything in the wrestling world, had it taken away by a horrific car crash. Probably should have never walked again, but went on to have a pretty productive life. Became an announcer in WCW for a while, or NWA at the time, and a manager for Dusty Rhodes a few times. It was one of those feel-good moments where it was just good to see that Magnum was okay. But before we go into our number one, as with any other list we mention, if you think we put someone up too high, if you think we put someone down too low, if you think we left someone off altogether, let us know what you think on it. Put it on our Facebook, on our Twitter, put it down where? Right down there in the comments. As you've seen with our friend Dizzle Pup, who mentioned the show, we read our comments and we'll go ahead, like I said, sometimes we take the suggestions. This is one of the times we did. Now, our number one return in the history of professional wrestling is 2002, Madison Square Garden. After a lengthy rehab from blowing out his quadricep, we had the Game return, Triple H. Nothing was said, nothing needed to be. An 8-minute standing ovation for one of the truly great wrestlers ever to lace up a pair of boots. One of the spine-tingling, chilling moments in the history of wrestling. I honestly think this moment, in my opinion, is up there with Hogan slamming Andre, with Sting versus Hogan, which it killed itself later on, but seeing them in the ring together, for different reasons, this moment's just as big as the Montreal Screwjob, just as big as Hogan slamming Andre, just as big as Ric Flair beating Dusty Rhodes or beating Harley Race. This moment solidified Triple H as the Game, as the top wrestler in the WWE, and the top dog, which he would go on to carry for the next 5 or 6 years afterwards. But basically, that's what we have to say about that. My name is George Coles, and this has been the Top 10 Wrestling Returns.